We are here today. It is Sunday, January the 16th, 2011, doing an interview with a World War II veteran.
My name is Alfred P. Samuels, Jr. I was born July the 11th, 1926. I'm from Charlottesville, Virginia. And during the war, I was a pharmacist mate in the U.S. Navy. That's a corpsman or a medic, for those who are not familiar with that rating.
Were you enlisted or did you join
I enlisted.
voluntarily?
I enlisted.
And can you tell me a little bit about maybe there was economic reasons at Charlottesville. Can you tell me about what Charlottesville, Virginia was like, caused you to enlist?
It was mostly just one of those things, those days you went to see the movies and all these war movies going on, so you just wanted to do your part. So you went and enlisted. I enlisted, when did I hit 17, I started harassing the folks.
Did you actually pick the branch of service, or did they give you the service?
No, that was the only one that would take me. I first went and signed up for the Air Force, and they says, "No, you're not big enough." Funny, something was really funny. He told me to go home and eat a whole bunch of bananas and come back the next day so I can meet the weight limit. I mean, the minimum weight. So I ended up in the Navy. Signed up for the Navy. Then I can remember after being accepted, going to the bus depot down on Water Street and taking the bus to Richmond, where the recruiting station was. It was quite an event for a small town boy.
How big was Charlottesville back then?
Very small. You knew virtually everyone in town. You could walk from one end of Charlottesville to the other. And they had a streetcar that ran up Main Street, up to the university, and to Rugby Road, and turned around and came back down alongside the stone wall there and down to the C&O station at the end of Main Street and turned around and went back again. Now, during World War II, they tore up those tracks for metal.
So where did they actually send you for boot camp?
Sampson, New York. Very cold.
When was this? What time of year?
Cold, winter, yes. Standing outside for guard duty or something in snow, cold, miserable.
Tell me a little bit about boot camp. Do you remember instructors? Can you remember exactly what it was like?
Well, for me, it was unusual. The minute I got to boot camp, they have a chief in charge of the barracks, for each group. And the first thing when I got there was the chief gave me a note, and he says, "Now my wife is a nurse over in this next unit over there. I want you to take this note over to her." This was the very first day. And so I found my way over to the sick bay where she was working and gave her the note. And the only thing the note said was, "You look at what's carrying this note." I looked like I was about 13 years old. And so it was, that was my first event at boot camp. So, but we had a lot of guys. There was one fellow there that was 13 years old. He was actually 13 years old, big for his age. There's another one at 15 that had a daughter, and they had all enlisted, and of course they had to be discharged. But boot camp was like it was for most everyone. It's getting used to the food, getting used to the routine, all the disciplines that we mostly lacked those days.
What was the food like?
Food was pretty good. Really good. Now you mentioned food. We'd been on a train going to boot camp on the way to boot camp, and so we were kind of starved to death when we got there. So they did run us over to mess hall to get us some food, and that's our first lesson. You ate everything on that tray. Nothing was left. When you got up to empty your tray, nope, you had to eat everything. So I gained a lot of weight in boot camp.
They worked you out quite a bit, didn't they?
Yes. For most of the guys, you get up and do the exercises and things that you weren't used to, push-ups, routine. Well, since you were in the Navy yourself, you understand.
Do you remember any instructors that gave you problems or?
No, in boot camp, it was kind of strange for me because looking like I was 13 years old, and having been in the Boy Scouts before I went in those days, during the war, early parts of the war, you were pretty well trained just in the Boy Scouts. You knew all the routines, all the manual of arms, all that sort of thing. So I ended up, being squad leader and that sort of thing. So I was very fortunate.
So what was your first assignment after boot camp?
Went to Maryland to hospital school. And
what we would consider a school. Not what we would consider a school.
Oh, no,
nowadays.
no. That's 90 days of very intense work. It's amazing what you learn. When you get through school, you know a lot. On the hospital school, you knew quite a bit. It's amazing what they can cram down you in that length of time.
Tell me a little bit about the medical training they would have given you back then.
Well, it's all the basics. I mean, the things that you did not know before, it's very hard to describe. And then, of course, when you got aboard ship later, then the doctor, on your way to the battlefront, you got even more training. That's when you learned about all the bandages and how to do this and how to do that. In the hospital school, it was how to give IVs, how to give shots, the usual small stuff that you do, all the basic things. It wasn't until later that you get into the wounds, but you got those on the way to the front. Training never stopped. It never stopped. It was amazing what you can end up doing.
So after Maryland, where did they send you?
South Carolina.
So you're still stateside at this point.
Yeah, still stateside. Hospital there. And after the sprint at the hospital there, where you continue your training, of course, and then they transferred us to Chicago, and where we ended up in Navy Pier, and in the sick bay there. Worked at the sick bay at Chicago, Navy Pier, and from there to Great Lakes, and which is just outside of Chicago. And then it was not the duty we really wanted to perform. So we went in and we came in off for Liberty one night, three of us, and we were looking at the board, the announcement board there, and it had a posting up there for what we call a suicide mission, where you couldn't be married, all that sort of thing, in order to qualify for it. So we signed up for it, and there was a beginning. So they shipped us out from Great Lakes to Chicago, to California. Now, it was the trip out to California was interesting. By train and boxcars. I mean, you would just sit on the big slid open doors and your feet dangling outside and just watch the world go by. So, and of course, when we got to California, we were from all the soot and everything, because you're talking about locomotives. You're not talking about diesel engines. You're talking about locomotives. And that's a long trip. That's 4 or 5 days going out there, living in a boxcar. So by the time we got to California, we were all pretty dark. Ojai, California. Back in the mountains. It was a training facility back there. And this was you were basically transferred into the Fleet Marines. They were, in those days, they called Fleet Marines, in preparation for an invasion. Just at the time when, after training there, and we were scheduled to go aboard ship, they canceled the invasion because the casualty rate would have been enormously high. They figured over 75%. So they decided to bypass that island. So then we were transferred from there, then they transferred us to Treasure Island. From Treasure Island, they put us on a ship to Pearl. And then Pearl, we were basically waiting for our ship to come in. So,
did you have any buddies that you were with from boot camp on?
Yeah, the 3 of us, that signed up together. 2 of us remained together. We got to the ship, they split us up. Was assigned to the ship. They sent him. There were 3 ships. There was the PCER 852, 853, and the 851. There are 3 experimental ships. They were PC based, and they had extended the deck aft to accommodate a sick bay. That sick bay had about 75 bunks in it. And when we got to the ship at Pearl, they split us up. He went to the 851. I heard from him years later. So he did survive the war. The 3 ships stayed together during the war as much as possible.
And you were on which one?
I was on 852. The USS PCER 852. Patrol Craft Escort Rescue. No one knew what those in the Navy. They'd never heard of the designation before. So they weren't sure whether we were a repair ship or what. They did not know what the R was for. When we went into the Philippines on the first invasion, no one knew what we were there for.
So would you consider it a medical ship?
Oh no. No, we were a MASH unit. We were a floating MASH unit is what we were. We got them off the beaches, out of the water, off of ships, whatever. Kamikazes hit a ship, we were the first ones there. Once they learned what we were a very welcome sight to most ships, because they knew we were there to take care of them. When most ships were trying to disperse during an attack, we were going in. We were going in to where the ships were hit or whatever.
Tell me about a common day on board this ship.
During battle or without it? Not during battle.
Some of the activities during downtimes.
Oh, during downtimes? You ever see MASH unit? First, I found the doctor that we served with on the 852 about 40 years after the fact, before I found him. The first thing he said to me on the phone was, Sammy, have you seen MASH? You know, we all felt the same way. It's this MASH was taking from our records. We did all of the silly things that they did. You had to, in order to keep your sanity. You know, we did the things, took one of the guys, this tall Marine, as a pharmacist mate, took him down to the food locker down in the ship, and the food lockers cooled, refrigerated, laid him out, covered him with a sheet, powdered his face and everything, and one of the guys down there to keep watch on him. You know, they thought this was a dead body, but they had to keep watch on him. After a little bit, he started moaning and sitting up. It took took about 3 hours to get him out of the. He ended up down in the bilges. He refused to come out. It scared the wits out of the poor guy. I mean, silly things like that. You were constantly pulling stunts on each other and doing things. Of course, we didn't have the nurses like they had in MASH, unfortunately. One thing is when you went alongside a hospital ship to transfer the casualties that you had picked up, we took them to hospital ships, to full facilities. And that's the only time you'd see women, is the nurses leaning over the side. So the banter back and forth. But we took care of them anywhere from hours to days before we transferred them. So there was a 75-bed sick bay in there. There were racks that just dropped down and chained between them. And we had a very small operating room, a small pharmacy, and we had a portable x-ray machine. But the first night, when they found out what we were at Leyte, the Philippines, the invasion of the Philippines, they signed as USS Honolulu got hit during one of the early attacks there, torpedoed. They sent us over to run circles around the Honolulu. If another plane came in, we were supposed to put ourselves between the torpedo and the Honolulu. In other words, we were more dispensable than the Honolulu was. She was hit bad. A lot of the guys were trapped down below, sealed in the compartments, legs blown off. We ended up, when they let them know what we were, we ended up with the wounded off of the Honolulu. We went alongside and took the wounded off. And it's amazing what guys can do, running with legs shattered beyond description. That's no way on earth they should be able to run on them, but run out of danger and things. But that was our first group that we received, was from the Honolulu. My first night was in the operating room with the doctor and Sug, and operating on some of those guys. And they're pretty well blown apart. It's amazing what the doctor did. He was a young doctor, not a lot of experience, straight out of medical school. He was thrown into these guys that are blown apart. But it's amazing what the human body can take. Absolutely amazing. Guy with his chest blown open, but they're still alive.
So that was during the
invasion of the Philippines. Yes. During that time, we took them off the beaches, off of ships that were hit. That was the beginning of the kamikazes, the suicide planes that came in and crashed the ships. We took great numbers of them off the beach, Seabees, Army. Later, the Marines came in, and we took them off of merchant ships. Merchant seamen that were bringing supplies, ships that were bringing supplies in that were hit. We got every branch of the services. If planes were shot down, we went to find the pilots, that sort of thing.
Did you stay aboard ship, or did you ever go ashore?
Went ashore. Yeah, you go ashore. That's interesting, in a sense, that you cannot believe the way those people lived. It was amazing.
Do you ever remember a time taking Marines and soldiers offshore, where it was just total chaos?
It was never chaos. Never chaos. It's a little hard to describe. What happens? Everybody is there. when you need them. Everyone is willing to do anything you ask of them. You know, when these LSTs or whatever, they were bringing the wounded out to the ship, for instance. There's every man there. That was an amazing experience to see just what everybody did.
Did you ever keep in touch with your family back home?
Oh, letters, yeah. Letters. Of course, I don't know whatever happened to them, you know, after they got through censoring them. Because you couldn't tell them nobody knew where you were in those days. You know, you went away, you know, when you left for sea, you'd be out there for a year and a half, and they didn't know where you were or what you were doing or anything else, because any letter you sent was just, had to be, oh, I'm here, I'm okay, type thing. Back then, one of the most serious things aboard ship was not to get mail. The doctor really worried about it. We went for months, you know, without getting any mail, because we're moving from one battle to another, one place to another. But it's amazing how the Navy kept track of us and managed to get mail to you finally, some way or other. It's just, it was awesome, especially if you think of it. This was not the computer age. This was in the days when it was all done manually. To see an invasion fleet, absolutely hundreds and hundreds of ships laden with men, material, guns, ammunition, food, everything anyone could ever need. Just hundreds of ships all over the horizon, all going for an invasion. I mean, everywhere you look, there were ships. I mean, just hundreds of ships over the horizon. They just disappeared. It was just unbelievable to see that. That's a sight that you can't imagine.
Tell me about a really humorous time you and your buddies.
We did all kinds of things. We had a tough nut ashore aboard ship. There was really, he was kind of a blowhard. He's from Brooklyn. If you can imagine, it was just as if you'd imagine him, just like you'd see in one of the movies, you know. And I closed a hatch. He was talking to me one day, couldn't get, you know, and I closed the hatch, and his fingers got caught. So we got together and thought we'd teach him a lesson. So after muster morning, we told him, well, come on, we got to amputate those fingers. I took him down, and we had the sick bay all laid out. We had every big saw, big clippers, monstrous clippers, laid all this out, laid down there, and it took him down there. And I'm telling you, you've never seen a tough boy break down before, but I mean, this guy, he just, I mean, there were cruel things, but you know, that's the way it was. You'd do things like, you know, you could fill a syringe with ether, and just, you could lay on a bunk, you know, and shoot ether over to somebody over there's trying to sleep, and all of a sudden you get these cold chills, you know, when it hits you, it's cold. Or take a guy, wrap him up in blankets, and put iodine drops all over him, or to make him think he had some kind of pox or something. I was just constantly picking on each other and doing things, all in good humor.
Besides goofing off, what did you guys do to entertain yourselves?
Well, for entertainment aboard ship, in the quiet times, of course, there's no place to go and no liberty and nothing else, you know. So it was cribbage, cards in the mess hall, and our up table. Up table was the carpenters had made a table, a long table, and we'd sit in the sick bay, and you put your hands on the table and just lay them there very lightly. You're not pressing down on it, nothing else. You just lay your hands on the table, and you'd ask questions, the table questions, and it would answer you. The end of the table would lift up, and drop down and tap a number of times. Once for yes, twice for no. And it spent hours and hours and days doing that. It was fascinating to the guys. That or you'd be up midships in the evening after chow. And that's when young fellows like me got educated about women and that sort of thing. They spend hours up there, gossiping about all that sort of thing. And us young fellows, it's really young fellows. This is where we got our education. Other than that, it was a constant watch on the ship, of course, but there were things that you could go up on the bow and watch the dolphins and porpoise race the ship, that sort of thing. You could spend hours doing that, or just sitting and chatting from somebody from Tennessee, someplace like that you got to know, and we became tighter than family. These people were, they were like family. We knew everybody aboard ship, and you get to know each other quite well. But otherwise, we had occasional movies when time permitted, and getting the camera, the movie projector turned out to be quite an ordeal. The doctor and the executive officer had to do a lot of bartering to manage to get a projector. And then when you run across another ship or got in close proximity to another ship, one of the big bargaining things was, what movies have you got? Can we trade movies? That sort of trading movies back and forth was one of the main objectives when you got near another ship. Or if we picked up survivors, I had managed to get one of the wounded where he could go back to duty or something, and you go alongside a ship. You wouldn't let him. You wouldn't allow him to go back aboard ship to his ship unless they so much ice cream, So bargain for
ransom.
Yes. How many gallons of ice cream you could con out of them? That sort of thing. It was so. Occasionally, you got a little ice cream that way, but ordinarily, it's all kinds of things to entertain yourselves.
Did you have a best buddy aboard ship?
Oh, all of them. Everybody's best buddy. There's no one special. You're always, except for a couple of guys that got caught up on one of the lifeboats one time together, and were subsequently sent back stateside and discharged. And later, one of the guys got a postcard from him. Says, ha, ha, ha. It staged the whole thing just to get out of the service. So you meet all kinds in the service. 99, 100% of them are great guys. Back in those days, they were there for a reason. Anyway, from Leyte, we went to Lingayen, which is Manila. And we got into the bay up there, Lingayen Bay. The kamikazes were really, really bad. And we had ended up, I remember one time we picked up a bunch of guys off of a cruiser that had been picked up off of a destroyer they subsequently had picked them up when their ship was hit and sunk. So their ship had been sunk by a kamikaze. They were picked up by a sister destroyer. That sister destroyer was attacked that very night, and she was sent down, and they were picked up by the cruiser. The cruiser, I'll tell you, you're ex-Navy man, you know that cruisers, no baby. But we went alongside and took them off of that. And we were under attack while we were taking them off and trying to get away. And I had to stand in front of the watertight hatch leading out to the fantail with a dog, big metal pipe used for dogging down that watertight doors to keep them from getting out, jumping overboard. You know, they had two ships blown out from under them. And here they were moving from this big baby down to us, just a little ship. It wasn't even as big as the one they were on, you know. And they didn't want any part of it. They wanted to just get off the ship. So I had to stand there with that and keep them from jumping overboard. So, and all the time, the bombs were dropping around us where they were being bombed and that sort of thing. So they went through a pretty good ordeal there, having two blown out from under them like that, one right after the other. Lingayen had a lot of kamikazes. Then after Lingayen, we had some damage, so we had to go back to one of the rest areas and go into dry dock in preparation for the invasion of Okinawa. Our sister ship, the 851, went to Iwo Jima and did quite a job there. We missed out on that one. But then we went to Okinawa, and that was a quiet one the first day. You know, the troops weren't having any trouble getting ashore, and everything was quiet. But then all hell broke loose after that because they brought in planes. Japanese flew in there, planes by the hundreds, and they were not having any success any other way. So they backup bombs they attached to the planes coming in, and these were bombs attached to them. They were man guided. They would fly over, drop this bomb with a person in it, and it would guide this bomb onto a ship. They hit a ship. It's amazing. And there was a lot of kamikazes there. The Ralph Talbot, for instance, was a destroyer, one of our destroyers, and she. I was standing on the fantail, and my buddy Looney was sitting there on an ammunition box, and all of a sudden the ship started shuddering, and going up to flying speed, and you knew that you'd gotten another call, and you were heading out. It was at dusk, and the time we got there, it was pretty dark, and the planes, Japs were still up there trying to finish off the Ralph Talbot, and so we couldn't put a motor launch in and go over to help them. So what those two captains did, the captain of the destroyer, the Ralph Talbot, and our captain, at sea, brought these two ships alongside each other, within a distance between them. Of course, if you had even touched the slightest bit, that'd have been catastrophe. And what Corman and the doctor, we had our backpacks on, and we went up and stood alongside the starboard side rail there. And as these preparation for jumping over, and you look down between the two ships and see all this roiling water down there going between the ships, and you knew if you missed and you dropped that nobody would even blink an eye because there'd be nothing you could do. You'd be crushed between the ships and drowned in the water, and the propellers would have chewed you to bits. So they wouldn't have been able to stop or do anything for you. So we one by one jumped from our ship to the Ralph Talbot, and there's never been a feeling like feeling those hands grasp you on the other side. Anyway, we went. Then we went over and they opened the watertight door, and as you know, the lights go out when you open a watertight door like that. And stepped inside and into, and I was one of the first ones, I guess, maybe the first one. And when my foot stepped inside, I knew what it was. Washing over the shoe was blood flowing as the ship rocked. It would flow back and forth. And we got inside and they closed the hatch. And the doctor said, looked over against the other bulkhead, and there's a guy laying there, and every time his heart would beat, blood would spurt across the wardroom. This was in the wardroom where they didn't have a sick bay or anything. So they had a bunch of guys that were there, legs burnt. They were burnt. Their legs blown off or cut off, or arms or whatever. And but we spent all night working on them. And it's another story. It's what had happened, the Jap had come in on the starboard side, and what they do is follow the tracers in. Tracer bullets when you're firing at them. And they blew that plane all to hell. I mean, but the engine kept coming, and the wings kept coming, even though they'd blown them off. The engine hit just after the place where we were there, and it's under a 20-millimeter gun mount, gun tub up there, and it hit just underneath it. And the ammunition loader had panicked and jumped, and that engine caught him before he even reached the deck below. And the gunner survived. The ammunition loader didn't, but the 5-inch guns aft, that's where the wing came in and cycled in and just cut him in half, shared him, all kinds of stuff. But anyway, and in wartime conditions like that, you had to survive and keep fighting. So had to just sweep the parts off over the side to clear the decks and things. And we worked all night on those guys, and we managed to. The ship was underway in time to go back to the bay. We got into the bay and transferred him to a cargo ship that was converted to a hospital, had hospital facilities. And I had 5 of them. Managed to save 5 of them. That's all we could save. Anyway, we got on there and they gave us a bunk. They gave us something to eat and a bunk to sleep in while they operated on these guys. Well, we were in the bunk not very long at all, and came in and roused us up. Says, "Come on, general quarters. We're under attack," and bring us down to a motor launch and put us in a motor launch. And our ship was in, but she's been called back out to her position, and so they put us in a motor launch and ran alongside while we managed to get aboard our ship, heading back out to sea again to our station. And We hadn't gotten out very far at all when we got a call to go back. Where we'd left those guys had been hit by a kamikaze, the ship. I met some guys later on Saipan that recognized them being aboard that ship. And they told me that the kamikazes hit just where those guys had been operated on and been put in the bunk, and the kamikaze hit exactly where they were. So, that's war. Sometimes you wonder, makes you wonder, because it seems to follow you around sometimes. If it's going to get you, it's going to get you. You end up with a lot of superstitions after after a war. So after Okinawa, they had a lot of such things as that. That was just one occasion. Another occasion where we got a call, and a bad attack on some destroyers and ships out there, and about 3 of them had been hit, and it was a real mass suicide attack. And anyway, so we got a call to go out there, and it was night, and the ship we were going to had really been hit bad. She actually sustained 3 kamikazes, and but they were in bad shape and really needed help because they were sinking. So anyway, we left a big trail of phosphorus behind us, about a mile long, which is just a light that leads right to you. The Japs are up there, and we're underway there. In fact, we were near her. She was just over the horizon, and it stopped. Her engines and everything, and the plane flew over her and never saw her. The Jap came over our bow and saw us from a trail we were leaving behind. And he came back and dropped a flare and came back and dropped a torpedo, which just when we just barely missed. They spotted it and turned into it, fortunately, just barely missed us when they hit the bow. But when that plane went over, well, the PCR had an open bridge. The bridge was open. The guys were sitting up there on the top, like that. And you hear these guys tell the story, if you ever tried to dig a foxhole in a steel deck. And that plane came over, and we thought it was going to kamikaze us because it missed. And it apparently changed his mind at the last minute. But anyway, when he went over, that whole ship vibrated like you would not believe. That's how close he came. He pulled up at the last second. I don't know where he chickened out or what, decided not to kamikaze us. Anyway, we got alongside there we went on our mission and got alongside the ship that was having problems. And I remember we went alongside right to her, and I looked down and there's a kid frozen to a 20 millimeter. His eyes were just staring ahead. He wouldn't let go of that 20 millimeter. They'd had 3 kamikazes hit him. And he wouldn't let go of that 20 millimeter. And there were 3 guys down there trying to get him away from him because we were right up against it right there, and he was right there. But he was just staring into space, and had a heck of a time breaking him away from his gun. So he wasn't about to give it up. Anyway, we get the guys we needed to off of there and took them in, and the destroyer came along and transferred some pumps to them, so they did manage to make it back to base, back to the harbor. But stuff like that, Okinawa was bad. There were innumerable ships lost there. So then in June, we got orders to head back to Pearl. They were going to outfit us to rearm us and bring us up to snuff for invasion of Japan. So we got back to Pearl. And
that was at the end of the war.
And while we were, that was June when we left there. And while we were being outfitted in August, that's when the war ended. And we were still in Pearl, and they, of course, canceled the invasion. And
do you remember at all, like, what you were doing at the time? That every person I know who was in World War II eventually heard that the Japanese surrendered.
Oh yeah, there was a big to-do. Pearl Harbor. This was Pearl Harbor, and I'd made some friends at a restaurant I ate there, frequented when we got ashore on Liberty, and at Pearl, and there was two girls, waitresses, Nora and her sister, cute Hawaiians, and yeah, I remember that day really well, because of course they closed the restaurant and we just took off, and it was a party day in Pearl, and of course I was very fortunate. I had two real cute girls who I stayed with friends until I left Pearl. They were really, the Hawaiians are really neat people. If they hadn't seen you for a half hour, they made you feel like they hadn't seen you for 2 years. They come up and hug you and just made you feel really welcome. But that was we ended up at the USO Club there in Pearl later in the day. So that was quite a day. All over at last. Then and of course the board shipped the A-52 left to come back stateside, and they loaded them down with people that needed to get back, to be discharged. And I stayed at Pearl at the hospital there, working at the hospital until about, I think it was April of '46 when I got out of. I left Pearl, came back home to Norfolk where I was discharged. And threw my sea bag on my shoulder and walked over to my aunt who was living there at the time before going home. It was all over.